some of the lack of capacity to think their way through the energy cost adjustment factor and to hang in there and really take the department to task in analyzing, the issues. And, I know one of the commissioners commented that we don't get paid for this, and, all that. And I understand that, but, you're acting in a quasi-policy role and shaping things that affect the ratepayers, basically hit people in their pocketbooks. And I think it's a privilege to be a commissioner, and, whether you get paid for it or not, and most don't. What do you think of all that? Now, how do you think you would feel in a situation like that when you're being pressured from all sides?
I guess a couple of things. One, it is an honor to be a commissioner. I served on the Lacers board for 6 years, 4 years as chair, and actually went through the ERIP process. So very familiar with, how the commissioner's role can become somewhat contentious. And you're having to listen to stakeholders with competing interests.
And what do you do when you're receiving a lot of pressure from the people who appointed you to vote the way that they want you to vote, even if instinctively you feel that that's not the best approach, or maybe not the best thing for the ratepayer, or that you feel that the department hasn't done the best job that it could do? How do you deal with that kind of pressure?
I think first and foremost, you have to deal with it as a fiduciary and do what's best for the system and what's best for the city. And once those hurdles are met, then you can start, considering what, competing interests there may be. But ultimately, being a fiduciary is something I'm familiar with in terms of being someone who's managed money for 20 some odd years. Understand the role of a fiduciary and acting in that manner. I think that's what's most important as a commissioner.
I'm gonna when we get down to the council floor, when is he slated to go to council?
This Friday.
This is scheduled for Friday, Chairwoman.
You can talk more about some of the goals and initiatives that you want to initiate during your term on the board. And my primary concern is that from here on out, I'm only voting for commissioners that I think can be independent and can withstand the pressure of politics and, doing what's best for the ratepayers and doing it on the record. Otherwise, I don't think there's any point in them being there. So you seem to be fine with being able to articulate how you handle that. And why don't you think about some things you'd like to talk about when we get to council floor on Friday, a couple of ideas that you may have that are specifically related to the Department of Water and Power.
Okay.
Okay?
Will do.
Okay, and then we don't have a quorum, so, this will go forward without recommendation, but we'll see you on Friday.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care.
Madam Chair, the next item is item 3. However, we're still waiting for staff from the Bureau of Sanitation. If you'd like to jump ahead, we can do that,
Okay.
and then go back to it.
Yeah,
That would
go to 4.
Item number 4.
Yeah.
DWP report relative to a lease agreement between the City of Mammoth Lakes and the DWP. We
Okay.
have staff from the Department of Water and Power.
All right. Why don't you just tell us the key components of the lease agreement? I think the current lease expires in 14 years in 2023. And just tell us why you need a new lease that supersedes the one that is in existence now, since this one doesn't expire until 2023.
Okay, thank you. Marty Adams, Director of Water Operations. What's happened on the airport leases, and the same thing was occurring with the Bishop Airport, is that the small airports rely a lot on federal aviation grants, and so typically they have to have at least 20, sometimes 30 years of property control to be able to show that they have the property under their control and their use for that amount of time to qualify for grants. And so this lease, down at 14 years remaining, would not qualify for any FAA grants. And so the airport's about half on city property, half on Mammoth Lakes property. And so the idea is just to make sure that they have that they have, can show control of the property for time out in the future. We've improved the lease terms to include some commercial, some revenues from commercial landing fees, increasing through time as they planned for some hopefully increased airport usage on a commercial basis. So we do believe it could be a revenue generator in the future.
What do you think the city can make under this new lease agreement? And I understand the department gets a percentage of revenue from the commercial landing fees. So do you have a projected amount over the course of the next 5 years or so?
I do not. I could see if there is one and get it to you. I do not have one now, though.
I can understand.
I don't have a projection at this time, but if you'd like, I could have staff develop one, but I don't.
Yeah, I
don't
think you
have
should. Don't you?
Yes, I mean, I know that there's,
I think we need to clearly.
right, they'd have to work with the Mammoth Airport staff because they have some plans of their own, so we'll base our projection based on what they're hoping to do with the airport in the future, but we could develop that for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're in a recession.
Okay.
Yeah. Let us know, would you? Do you want to bring this back?
Well, actually, this thing, it's scheduled for council consideration this Friday. It's on a 30-day period, so if you'd like, they can provide that information to us prior to that or
Yeah,
in
please
council.
do. I want to have it prior to that, because if I don't ask, I'm sure Mr. Parks will ask, as
Sure.
Budget and Finance Chair. So be ready to tell us how much we're going to make
Okay.
under this new agreement, so that explains why we need to supersede, and the percentage of revenue that we're going to get from the commercial landing fees, and projected amount over the course of 5 years, if you can do that, please, to make the case to why we should supersede.
Right, we'll do that,
Okay.
yes. And in any case, because of the FAA grants, I think that we certainly need some extension in order for them to stay viable and make sure that they can qualify for some of the grants available to them.
Okay,
But I will do that.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Am I next?
Actually, jump ahead to number 5.
You're on 5 too? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So this position on this item is to recommend approval?
Wait, number-
Indeed.
Without,
Yeah,
we don't have
Communication
enough
from the
people
chair.
to- Yeah,
Okay.
communication, yeah.
okay. Number 5,
Now, 5 was
actually, that was approved on consent.
yeah, all right, so we go to 6.
So number 6, DWP report relative to an amendment to an agreement with MWH Americas for scientific
I think,
studies.
I think that's the one you described as.
That was the item that was on.
I think that's the one you described as number 5, but I'm not sure. though.
Okay.
Who's going to do that one, you or Wendy?
Who's
Wendy.
MWH?
Number 6?
Is MWH?
MWH, but I thought that's the one that you described as 5 on the consent.
Number
have it-
6, why don't you read 6 into the
I have
record?
it 5 and 6 anyway, so
Let him do
ask
6.
anything.
Okay. DWP report relative to an amendment to an agreement with MWH Americas for scientific studies.
Okay, this is,
Okay, so I just want you to tell us why you need to extend the agreement for a year, and what additional studies related to the Owens Valley and Inyo County
Yeah, you did.
water management will be done, and the total contract amount.
okay, the total contract amount at this point has been, the contract had an amendment approved by the council almost 6 years ago, and the contract was originally, it's a very large contract, it's approaching $30 million. This is for groundwater studies, habitat studies, environmental studies in the Owens Valley, particularly pertaining to our ability to pump the groundwater rights. So what this amendment is to basically add 1 year's extension to the existing funds that have already been approved. We're trying to complete the Green Book revision. You may remember when you were on the Inyo LA Standing Committee that the groundwater pumping and the Green Book, which dictates the groundwater pumping conditions and the annual allotment that we can withdraw from the basin up there, is an item of great contention. We're trying to complete that effort. Unfortunately, in our partnering with Inyo County Water Department, unfortunately, they had some schedule problems and labor problems that prevented them from completing the steps that they needed to take. And so we've been somewhat on hold waiting for them to complete their portion of the project. So now that they're back on track, this is to give us an additional year to complete that and get the revised Green Book finally completed.
What's the total contract amount of the existing
The
agreement?
existing was about $8 million. We spent a little under that. We did not authorize all the tasks.
Yeah.
And then 6 years, that was a 3-year contract, and there's a 6-year contract that came to council at another $22 million. And this is that was a total of 9 years of work. This had a 10th year in the same total, so it's around about $30 million was the total.
Is there any additional funding needed?
No additional
So you're
funding.
okay.
Right. And last a couple weeks ago, you asked about where this fits in our budget. This is budgeted for in the water system budget. The benefit to this, if we get the Green Book revision and we have some better rules to follow for groundwater pumping, is that for every 2,000 acre feet of water we pull out additionally out of the ground, it's worth $1 million directly on the pass-through cost to our customers. And so every time we get another 2,000 acre feet in a year, every year, it's $1 million off the tab to the customers. So it's in our water, it's in our budget, but the pass-through is benefit to the customers directly.
Okay. All right, communication from the chair.
Okay.
Was there a question on the fuel card one? Because I didn't know if...
We'll go back to that one when we're done with this one, actually.
What's the next one?
Next one, actually, we skipped over 5. We should
Oh,
go
we
back
did?
to
Okay.
5, yeah.
I thought that was continued. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So the disposition on this one is to move forward as communication from the chair.
Yeah.
Number 6, okay. So number 5, also a DWP report relative to the lease between Fleet Card Fuels and a department for city-owned property.
Right. And this is one of our regular commercial leases in the town of Bishop. Basically, the new lessee has been operating the business for the current lessee, and the lease is about to expire. This is one of those little messy situations where we own a piece of property, but the improvements on the property are owned by a private party. And this is one of the reasons that we're trying to divest ourselves of lands within the city limits up in the Owens Valley, because we have these situations. So here we have a new vendor basically taking over the lease, taking over the business on department land. And so this is basically, that lease is running out, so it transfers to the new lessee under the Charlie Brown Act.
What does the current lessee use the property for?
It's a commercial fueling station and truck wash.
Okay.
Right. And ultimately,
Is this going to be an ongoing use, or do you?
it is an ongoing use. The very original lessee years ago had a fuel contamination issue that has since been cleaned up at the lessee's expense. Ultimately, this is one of the properties in the city that we would offer for sale, but we need to complete the new business transaction first, and then under the Charlie Brown Act, the current lessees and current users of the properties always have first right of refusal in Inyo County.
Okay, now pursuant to the agreement, the annual rent increases gradually every year to the 5th year of the agreement?
Right, and then it gets renegotiated for further increases after that.
Okay, now, but you're hoping that the city will be out of it by then?
I'm hoping so. There's been a great interest. I've seen some of the articles in the Times about the city holding lands inside the city of LA holding lands inside the towns of Bishop and Lone Pine and Big Pine and Independence, and the desire to try to get those into private hands. Most of those properties were acquired during the Depression when people sought for us to buy their properties. We've had a long-standing policy of trying to get out from the ownership. The reality of it is a lot of the folks can't afford to buy the property, but they do in Inyo County, the Charlie Brown Act gives them first right of refusal, so they can always continue the lease or have first right to purchase the property. This is a case where we think that as we move forward in the months ahead with offering properties, we think that this person will be interested in making a purchase. And then that'll give us out of the business of having a gas station on department property in the city, so at least gets us out of the liability as well.
Okay, the record reflect Mr. Krikorian is here. We're on item 5 if you had any questions. All right. We still don't have forms. So.
Okay, would communication from
Yeah.
the chair?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'll provide that information to you.
Yeah, great. What do we have?
That takes us to item number 7. You still have an item on hold, number 3, waiting for staff from sanitation for 3.
If they don't make it, then we can continue it unless
Certainly.
it's time sensitive.
Yeah, it's not time sensitive.
All right, well, hey.
Okay.
Just have to leave them.
Number 7, DWP report relative to the feasibility and findings associated with an underground utility district along Central Avenue.
Now, of course, this would be dear to my heart. So hopefully you'll have a lot of really good things to say.
Marvin Moon, Director of Engineering. Rudy Monmoy was instrumental in putting this feasibility study together, and he'll give the highlights for the report.
And I want to ask you one other question.
Yes.
This is a note and file item, I believe. Is it not, Mr.
It is a
Sealy?
note and file, the report itself. However, there are recommendations that you authorize or instruct the clerk
Yeah.
to proceed with notification of
Yes.
the public.
Yeah. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time to reduce the visual blight and to enhance our ability to develop the avenue, to more contemporary standards. I've looked at your report, and I want to ask you if you have had a chance to make a report to my planning group and my own internal group in my office.
Rodolfo Monroy, LADWP underground conversions. No, I have not.
Okay, would you make some time to do that?
Certainly.
And you can work that out with Mr. Catalano here. If you want to go ahead and make, I'd like for you to go more in depth with them, and I don't know that Mr. Krikorian is that deeply interested in the development of Central Avenue south of Washington Boulevard, but you know, it's interesting. So why don't you give us just a synopsis, and then you will, arrange for you to go into the planning group and really speak to them in depth.
Very good. The Department of Water and Power, in conjunction with LA Public Works, we formed a technical advisory committee and invited the various entities to discuss the feasibility of doing the creating the underground utility district along Central Avenue in conjunction with the streetscape project. Our findings were that the total cost of the project was going to be about, for utilities, property owners, about $18.1 million, and that would include all the telecoms, cable TV, and other appurtenances on our overhead system. The process, the investigation of the feasibility, we also found that Ordinance 145-148, which was ratified on October 5th, 1973, allowed the formation of underground utility districts for whatever purposes it may be. Primarily, it was a visual and for aesthetics. And the cost of DWP to actually, part of the process here, let me back up just a second. Part of the process is to, when you establish an underground wiring district, what you do is you require all the different entities that are being affected to fund their own work. So DWP would pick up the tab on their stuff, and the telecoms would pick up the cost of theirs. And the property owners specifically will have to do the undergrounding on their properties, modify their properties in order to do the new underground service connections.
Let me ask you a question. Who actually conducts, or what authority actually conducts the hearings? Would it be this committee, or?
The hearings are supposed to be conducted by the City Council.
City Council, okay,
Yes.
great.
So I guess once you've given 15-day notification of all the affected entities, then you go ahead and call, I guess you put it on your agenda. And
then who actually does the research to identify the property owners? Or
the
does
city
affected,
clerk does.
Okay, and does affected property owner mean, usually primarily means property owner, but would it also mean tenant?
Yes, and I think, probably the tenants and just the mailing addresses, I think, is where you should direct.
I'll tell you what, I don't want to waste Mr. Krikorian's time on the finer points of that. We can talk about that in our planning group meeting.
Of course.
I would like to proceed with this and start taking the next steps regarding notification.
Well, the next step is to provide a 15-day notification to all utilities and property owners that are within the districts, whether or not they're connected. They're utilizing our electric.
Can we commence that now as of this action once it's approved by City Council?
You may, and we forwarded the ordinance information to Mr. Pietro.
Okay.
And so he has all the information that he can go by.
Great.
We would recommend that we have a sit-down with the Department of Water and Power and the city clerk, so we can iron out the steps that are needed to take place. I understand from the city clerk's office, they're going to need the addresses for the specific, and we'll need to work with them on.
All right, so why don't you work with Mr. Catalano, and then since that's a CRA redevelopment area, let's bring them in too. They may actually be able to assist us.
The ordinance itself is also somewhat dated. There's references to, I think, committees and entities that no longer exist.
Really?
Yeah, I think like.
All right.
93?
Yeah.
19, yeah.
Why don't you go through that, and we'll make a list and then see what motions I need to introduce to clean it up. For the record, Mr. Koretz is also here now.
Okay.
All right, so.
May I just conclude with just a comment here? The study determined that forming a district is a feasible method to expediently achieve the removal of power poles. The key advantage of providing underground utility district, of course, is that everything's self-funded. The key disadvantage is that if we opt to go with this kind of what we call 20A, Real 20A underground conversion. What that's going to do is postpone utility work that we planned on doing, some conversion work in other council districts, and I think that's a key item to be aware of.
Understand. The contiguous districts are all so old that
Yeah.
I think once we got into the logistics of that, we might find that we would not be forestalling any work in any other district because the area we're talking about is bounded on the east by the 14th and the light industrial area, which is quite old. I mean, this is the original part of the city. And then north of there is light industrial, and then basically to the west is all me. So then you jump over into Mr. Reyes' district, but those are all fairly old districts with old infrastructure, not a lot of updating in terms of technology or wiring, or I think the last big infrastructure project that went through any of those districts was ESIS, and
And that is,
I don't think we'll be bumping into anybody, really. I think we'll be okay.
I think you all got, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So now that we have 3 people here, I'd like to move to approve that.
Okay,
And then do we want to go back and
sure. We could run through.
ratify the, yeah.
Just quickly, number 7, I think we had recommended note and file the actual report. Given just a quick preliminary review of the ordinance, it might be more appropriate to accept the findings of the department's report and then issue or instruct the clerk to proceed with notification to the public. So I think the disposition should be to accept the findings of the DWP report, that the project is feasible,
Okay,
and we can work that out.
okay.
So, number 1, forward without recommendation to the council. The items before the council this Friday.
Okay, that is Mr. Holloman.
Okay.
All right.
Number 2, approve. Number 3 is currently on hold. Number 4, approve. Number 5, approve. Number 6, approve. And number 7, you just approve.
Okay. All right, is that the end of the agenda? No public speaking cards. I don't see Dr. Williams here. Anybody else wishing to speak to items that are not on the agenda? This is the opportunity to come forward and do so. Ms. Yancey, did you want to say something? Oh, all right, I saw your fingers up in the air. Okay.
I think we'll continue that one if you'd like.
Yeah, that's fine, because they're not here, so, yeah, that's fine. All right, meeting's adjourned. Thanks.